Hello and welcome to the 6th webinar by Search for Common Ground on Countering Violent Extremism. In this video, we'll explore the importance of engaging youth in countering violent extremism, as well as how enlisting youth as partners and even leaders can help us to achieve our common goals. Now, engaging youth gives us a variety of benefits, and that's because really in all fields, youth are a source of potential positive change. They're also better able to connect with the vulnerable youth that we want to engage with. Next, youth also bring an added value to our efforts because they bring these unique perspectives to the issues that youth face and really the needs, interests, and fears of vulnerable youth. Youth are also able to bring unique ideas and solutions to the issue of violent extremism, such as through new technologies. And really all of these things make youth better at engaging vulnerable youth than perhaps government or civil society organizations. Now, as we engage youth, not just as participants, but as partners and leaders in this field, we also happen to build their resilience as they become leaders and role models and change makers in their communities. But how do we go about doing that? We can engage youth in countering violent extremism when we meet their needs for respect, dignity, and agency so they can be empowered in the ways that prepare them for success and make them most resilient to the appeal of violent extremism. If we're to best engage youth, we should help them to secure their own future, including the things that they worry about on a day-to-day basis. These things are the reasons why they may opt to pursue pursuing their day-to-day needs rather than become engaged in these efforts, so they can really present a barrier. This includes things like getting an education, starting a career, or resolving the issues in their communities. This can be particularly important when those things are actually also considered to be drivers of violent extremism. Therefore, we should consider ways that youth can be helped in reaching their goals while also being engaged in countering violent extremism. Now, youth can be engaged in all levels of programming, and that's from the design to the implementation to even the final evaluation of programming. But we also need to ensure that youth are not just engaged at the local level. This means that they should be involved at forming policies at the international, regional, and national levels. They should also be engaged at the practitioner level to be engaged in implementation, as well as at the grassroots level. Now, this is an understanding that has been facilitated through a long process and has been formally recognized with Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security. When we think about participation, we must see that not all participation is equal. Look at the chart on your screen. It looks a lot like a ladder because participation is very much a spectrum. And that means that the level of participation really increases as youth are given more authority, agency, and input in our programming. Now look at the bottom where youth voices are manipulated even without their knowledge, or youth are simply involved as observers in decision-making bodies. For example, where youth are only able to voice concerns but are not able to make decisions or to cast votes. This level of participation can really increase all the way to the point where youth are initiating their own programming and work with other stakeholders as equals. So let's take a look at an example of one woman whose level of participation increased over time. In this video by Search for Common Ground, Fatima began as a participant in local programming in Morocco. Now, over time and over a series of projects, Fatima has become a leader in countering violent extremism in her area. Click on the picture on your screen to watch the video. Now, sometimes there are actually barriers to youth participation that must be overcome if youth are to be engaged as partners and leaders in our efforts. In this example, by March Lebanon, you can see many examples of how this organization engaged young men and women to improve their community in ways that built their own resilience. Now, as you watch the video, pay close attention to the ways and indeed the barriers faced by these youth to be fully active in their communities and how this project in particular worked to overcome them. You can click on the picture on your screen to watch the video. In order to have a do-no-harm approach to our efforts to engage youth in countering violent extremism, we should look for ways to avoid the following risks. We must understand that ourselves or other practitioners may not actually have the tools or flexibility to understand how youth are already engaged in their context. We may even hold or believe in negative stereotypes about youth, especially vulnerable youth in our communities. So we must be sure that when we engage youth, we give them an equal say or equal representation in what we do, so that they feel empowered rather than used. We must also be sure to properly prepare youth for the engagement so that they're able to succeed or have proper expectations of what that engagement will mean. You know, they also can have a fear, especially by vulnerable youth, that the information that's gathered through the collaborative process could potentially be used in ways that might damage the relationship or provide risks for other youth. So therefore, if we are to engage youth in a collaborative process openly in our efforts, they must feel safe to do so, and they must feel that they're not putting anyone else in danger. So as we conclude this webinar, let's consider the following key takeaways. Countering violent extremism efforts cannot be effective if they do not meet the needs of youth. This includes truly understanding those needs and how to address them. Next, youth and youth leaders must be given respect and dignity and agency, or they won't really feel empowered to be leaders and partners in countering violent extremism. Youth must also be engaged in all levels of our efforts, including at the policy, practitioner, and grassroots levels. Indeed, we should actually recognize that youth are already working in this field, and we should be conscious of their efforts, whether through mapping them or some other way. So we should look for ways to learn from their experiences and perspectives and benefit from their expertise. We should also recognize that youth and youth-led organizations organize and operate differently, which could sometimes complicate our collaboration. This can also be an opportunity to help us make programming more effective, though. As you saw from the youth participation ladder, participation can include really many levels. And as these levels increase, that's because youth are able to have a greater say in the programming and policies that are being implemented. Finally, we need to recognize that there may be barriers to youth engagement in their communities and encountering violent extremism in general. And so we should be conscious about how to overcome those barriers as we move forward. That's all for this webinar, but in the next we'll explore how education can be a tool for countering violent extremism. Thank you.